shoot him, or regret it for life. Those were the exact words barked by one of them just seconds before they electrocuted my wife in our own driveway. Guns then turned to me. I didn't flinch, didn't plead, just met the eyes of their unit commander and said 5 calm, loaded words: "Contact Brigadier Knox, right now." That's when the entire SWAT unit turned to stone. If a mere sentence can halt a team of elite operatives mid-raid, hit that like for the ghosts walking among us, the ones who never really stopped serving. On Sycamore Lane, most folks just knew Dean Carter as the guy who could breathe life into dead engines. His garage was a neighborhood landmark, door always open, classic blues humming, a hot mug of coffee on the workbench, and a beat-up Trans Am always mid-repair. At 70, Dean's fingers had lost a bit of finesse, but his mind remained a vault of mechanical mastery. What his neighbors didn't know: a past cloaked in secrecy, 29 years of covert deployments, black ops without names, and commendations buried in a rusted army footlocker rather than displayed on any wall. Dean wouldn't have it any other way. He preferred being respected for fixing a busted alternator, not for missions he could never talk about. The only person alive who knew every shadow he'd walked through was Janice, his wife of 45 years. She was there through the silence, through the night terrors, through the invisible wounds and the visible ones alike. Their modest, single-story home had become their sanctuary, peaceful, low profile, far from the noise of what they'd both endured. Dean spent Thursdays at the Veterans Hall, Saturdays building custom ramps for disabled ex-Marines, and Tuesdays mentoring teens in auto shop kids other teachers had already written off. It was a quiet life. A good one. That Wednesday afternoon was supposed to be like any other. Dean was flat beneath old Mrs. Langford's Buick, oil draining slow and black into a pan. Janice was off to Larkin's Market. Wednesday was double discount day for seniors. The September breeze carried the first hint of leaves about to turn when it happened. Tires screeched. Not casual, not accidental. It was a calculated howl, urgent and sharp against the calm street. Dean slid from under the car, engine grease on his palms, just in time to see a matte black SUV wedge itself across his driveway, then another, and 2 more behind it. They came fast, uniformed, unrelenting. "Federal unit on the ground," barked through a megaphone, as armed men in tactical gear swarmed like hornets, faces hidden behind visors, weapons leveled. Dean raised his hands slowly. No sudden moves, but his expression was steady. "There's a mistake," he began. A rifle shoved toward him answered that. "Face down. Now." Dean didn't resist. The pavement bit into his cheek as thick boots surrounded him. His arms were yanked back, wrists cinched tight with zipties. Radios crackled. Orders flew. He caught one sentence sharp and surgical: "Secure the structure." Then the sound he feared most: tires again. Janice was back. She pulled into the driveway, humming to herself, bags tucked in her arms, completely unaware of the war zone that was her front yard. "Dean, what's going on?" 3 agents turned in a heartbeat. Rifles pointed at the woman holding a loaf of bread and a gallon of milk. "Drop the bags. Hands up now." Janice froze, heart pounding. The brown paper bags trembled against her chest. "Please, I'm just," she began. "She's not listening," one young operative barked, voice cracking like dry wood. "Ma'am, final warning." Janice started to lower the bags, but her joints stiff with age and arthritis couldn't obey fast enough. "Non-compliant civilian," the rookie muttered, stepping forward, taser raised. Dean's voice sliced through the chaos. "She's my wife. She's just carrying groceries." But the boot on his back pinned him harder. "Back off, old man, or you're next." The taser hissed. Janice's body convulsed as electricity hit. The bags flew apart, oranges scattered, eggs exploded on the concrete. Milk splashed like white blood across her dress. She crumpled in silence, like a marionette cut from above. Dean didn't shout, didn't thrash. A soldier's instinct still ruled him, a mind trained to analyze before acting. His eyes locked on the man with command stripes. "Let me stand," he said, voice low but carrying weight. The commander stared. For a moment, a long, crackling moment, nobody moved. Then a nod. Dean Carter began to rise, wrists still bound behind him, grease and blood smeared across his palms. Even with his wrists zip-tied behind him, Dean Carter met the commander's eyes and spoke 5 words that detonated confusion across the unit. "Contact Brigadier Knox. Right now." The SWAT commander blinked, just once a flicker of hesitation in the armor of his focus. Around them, the tactical squad held their positions, rifles steady, radios still buzzing with clipped, coded jargon. But the energy had changed. It was no longer a raid, it was an error unraveling. A young officer sneered, trying to shake the moment. "That's supposed to scare us, Grandpa?" he scoffed. "We're here on a federal warrant. Elias Navarro, top-level cartel runner. So cut the military fairy tales." Dean didn't even blink. His voice remained like steel, cooled in silence. "This is 319 Sycamore Lane. You want 319 Sycamore Avenue in you. Entirely different zip code. Genius." He motioned his chin toward the driveway. "Now release me, and call Brigadier Knox at Strategic Command. And for the record, my wife has a pacemaker." The commander's lips parted slightly. For the first time, doubt crept in. "Check the address," he ordered one of the squad members. As a tech tapped into a tablet, Dean spoke again, this time quieter, but no less commanding. "Left inside pocket of my jacket. Open it, but do not touch the badge." Gloved hands reached into Dean's grease-stained jacket and withdrew a small, scratched metal case. The Black Eagle emblem burned like a brand across it, unmistakable to anyone with top-tier clearance. The commander's eyes widened. "Black Watch Protocol," Dean said flatly. The radio chatter dimmed, the kind of silence that only comes when people suddenly realize they've made a career-altering mistake. One of the older team members, eyes sharp with memory, leaned in to whisper, "Sir, that's not just military. That's cloaked Tier 1. Strategic black." The color drained from the commander's face like someone had flipped off his blood pressure. His whole demeanor shifted in a blink. "Medic, now," he barked. "Cut him loose." A blade hissed as the plastic ties snapped. Dean moved without hesitation, kneeling beside Janice. His hands, once used to dismantle improvised explosive devices in hostile zones, now checked her pulse with trained tenderness. The chaos crumbled around him. One operative fumbled with his phone, digging through federal databases for verification. Another barked updates into his radio about the address discrepancy. Dean ignored them all. "You hit the wrong damn house," he said, lifting Janice gently into a sitting position as the medic arrived. "You didn't double-check, you escalated without verifying, and you tased a 65-year-old woman for holding bread and bananas." Across the street, behind a half-closed screen door, Mr. Harper recorded the whole thing on his ancient phone. That video would later hit 1 million views in less than 12 hours. And what everyone remembered, the moment Dean said 5 words and every single SWAT rifle lowered like someone had shut off gravity. The commander approached slowly now, helmet off, his face pale and drenched in cold sweat. "Sir, we had a source. The intel said—" "You didn't have intel," Dean cut him off sharply. The quiet steel in his voice made the officer step back again. "What you had was ego, adrenaline, and an itchy trigger finger." Janice stirred in his arms, eyes fluttering open, dazed. "Dean?" "I'm here," he said, pressing his forehead to hers briefly. Then he stood up and turned back to the commander. "I'm taking my wife inside now. Your team is to remain outside, and you will call Brigadier Knox immediately." The young officer who had pulled the trigger on the taser hadn't moved an inch. He stood there like a stone statue, the gravity of what he'd done swallowing him whole. As Dean helped Janice toward the porch, another officer quietly gathered the fallen groceries, apples, milk carton, half leaking, eggs ruined. It wasn't redemption, just a small, silent gesture. Too little, too late. As they stepped over the threshold of their home, Dean heard the whispers. It was happening, the digital confirmations, the hits on files that didn't show up on public records. His name had triggered flags in systems these guys weren't even supposed to know existed. No one ever expected to run into a Black Watch operator in suburbia. They came hunting a narco kingpin. Instead, They tased the wife of a living specter. If respect had come before bravado, maybe none of it would have happened. Comment honor if you believe legends don't have to raise their voices. 40 minutes passed inside the Carter house. Janice lay resting on the couch, a cold compress across her ribs where the barbs had landed. Dean sat beside her, unmoving, his calloused hand wrapped gently around hers, his eyes constantly scanning. Peering through a sliver in the curtain, Dean Carter watched the SWAT team outside. Their earlier confidence had deflated, postures now uncertain, silence heavy. 2 officers had been sent to the correct location, only to discover the fugitive they'd been after had vacated the property 3 months ago. Radio chatter from the command van had shifted tones from barked tactics to frantic containment. That's when the black SUV arrived, no lights, no sirens. It glided to a halt behind the cluster of police vehicles with deliberate precision. The man who stepped out wore no uniform, just a tailored charcoal suit with a presence that made rank irrelevant. Brigadier James Knox. He was 62, haircut razor sharp, movements economical. The look in his eyes wasn't angry. It was worse, the disappointed calculation of a man who'd managed more volatile situations than the people around him could imagine. He strode toward the house without a glance at the flustered SWAT commander scrambling to intercept. Dean met him at the door. For a moment, neither spoke. 2 lifetimes of classified history passed between their eyes in silence. Then, with sharp precision, Knox raised his hand in salute. Dean returned it, the first time in over a decade his hand had lifted for anything but a wrench. "They told me you were gone," Knox finally said. "Only in the files," Dean replied, with the faintest twitch of a grin. Knox's eyes moved past him, to where Janice lay on the sofa inside. His jaw clenched. Then he turned toward the assembled squad. When he spoke, his voice didn't rise, it didn't have to. His presence cut through the air like a scalpel. "This man," he said, gesturing to Dean, "wrote the operational doctrines you just violated." The team froze. One of them, the older member who had earlier recognized Dean's badge, went pale. "Carter?" he whispered. "D. Carter? You wrote the Civilian Threat Engagement Manual, the one we trained with in Phase 4. Dean gave a quiet nod. Not pride, just confirmation. Knox stepped forward now, face locked on the SWAT commander. "You didn't apprehend a criminal today," he said. "You publicly mishandled a strategic asset whose resume outweighs your entire squad's combined." The commander opened his mouth to speak. Knox didn't let him. "The officer who deployed a taser without verified threat engagement, where is he?" A young man stepped forward, visibly shaking. His face had none of the cocky swagger from earlier. It had been replaced with the blank terror of realizing he'd stepped into a career-ending moment. "Strip your gear," Knox said. The young officer didn't argue. He removed his tactical vest, his sidearm, his badge, and placed them on the hood of a cruiser with slow, deliberate motion. "You're relieved. Report to your captain for reassignment. Immediately." No one said a word as the officer walked toward a patrol car and sat inside, head down, crumpled by shame. Knox turned back to Dean. From inside a suit jacket, he withdrew a single sealed envelope. He extended it carefully. "This contains 2 things," he said. "A formal apology from the department and a full reactivation of your clearances. We need you back. The world's gotten messier." Dean looked at the envelope, but didn't take it. "It hasn't changed, James," he said quietly. "The targets, the tech, the uniforms, they all shift, but the world stays the same. And right now, I serve her." He nodded toward Janice inside, "and the guy across town who can't get his Ford running." Knox paused, then placed the envelope gently on the porch rail. "The offer stands." Then he turned and walked back to his vehicle without another word. Dean never opened the envelope. Some doors don't need keys because they were never meant to be walked through again. A week later, the town's police chief, Malcolm Raines, stood at a podium framed by American flags and reporters. He didn't name Dean. He didn't mention Janice. He didn't have to. The internet already had. What he did say, that a new mandatory protocol had been implemented across the department. They were calling it the 5-word directive. A new approach. De-escalation, precision in civilian engagement, proper identification, and most importantly, respect. The community didn't need a press release to understand what had sparked the sudden rush toward reform. Janice Carter recovered slowly. The taser hadn't aggravated her heart condition, thankfully, but dark bruises bloomed along her chest where the barbs had struck. She never spoke of the pain, not the sharp kind in her ribs, nor the deeper kind that came from being seen as a threat in her own front yard. But something in her changed. She stood a little taller beside Dean at the market. She held eye contact with every officer they passed, shoulders square, unwilling to be made small by that moment. Dean continued his rituals. Mrs. Langford's Buick got its overdue oil change. Thursdays still found him at the VFW. And every Tuesday, high school kids still crowded around him in the auto shop, learning that second chances sometimes came in the form of busted engines and steady hands. But the neighborhood noticed what had shifted. Every squad car slowed as it passed the Carter home. Officers nodded first when they saw Dean walking in the mornings. And once in a while, that same black SUV, the one without markings, would quietly return. Its driver never rang the bell, just left things on the porch. A stack of books, a bottle of old scotch. Once, a restored photograph. Dean, as a younger man, standing among a unit of ghosted silhouettes, every face but his, blurred by redacted intent. 3 months after the raid, a rookie officer's cruiser stalled just down the block. Dean stepped out of his garage with a wrench in hand before the kid could even radio dispatch. They worked under the hood together in silence, the rookie fumbling both with the engine and with words. "Sir," he said finally, his voice careful, "at the academy, they talk about you now, about what happened. They say you could have wrecked careers that day. Just one phone call." He paused, tools in hand, then asked, "Why didn't you?" Dean tightened a bolt before answering. "Because revenge doesn't fix engines," he said, "and it doesn't fix people either." The cruiser roared to life. One turn of the key. Dean stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag. "Thank you, sir," the young officer said, voice filled with respect. "Dean," he corrected. "Just Dean." Later that week, a reporter caught up with him outside the VFW. Microphone shoved forward like a challenge. "Mr. Carter, why didn't you fight back when they attacked your wife? You had the training. You had every right. Why just 5 words instead of action?" Dean looked directly into the camera. No anger in his eyes. No pride either. "Because 5 words were louder than fear," he said. "And sometimes the strongest stance isn't the one where you're standing over someone. It's the one where you're just still standing." Then he turned, walked back to his truck, back to the life he'd chosen. A life that wouldn't be written into textbooks or paraded in medal halls. Just a man who fixed things. A man who knew some power never needed shouting to be heard. Who had learned, over decades of war and silence, that real authority often whispers in acts of restraint. A man who had once been a weapon, and chose finally to be a builder. Subscribe if you believe some men don't need ranks or titles, just 5 words and the truth behind them.